Thank you so much for having me. It's my honor and privilege to be here. Um, I tell people sometimes there are certain places and cities that I travel to that I'm not always welcomed so warmly, but Detroit is not one of those places. I think civil rights leaders have always found a welcoming home here. It's why Rosa Parks relocated her family here. Dr. Martin Luther King actually loved Detroit a great deal and had so many amazingly close friends here and traveled and spoke here often. It's my honor to be here because we're in deeply problematic times, and I thank you particularly for this invitation. Thank you for Imam Dawood and for CAIR Michigan and others for having me during such a critical time, and I cherish the opportunity to be a voice here this afternoon. And when I say we live in problematic times, I know nobody in the room is surprised to hear that. If anything, it really is a matter of what particular problem I'm talking about. And I want to unpack in a way how we got where we are right now as a country. I want to give some practical thoughts on ways that we can organize together and fight back and shed some light on where we're going. In 2014, I was actually not a full-time journalist. I was working as the director of communications for an environmental charity in Los Angeles called Global Green. I'm 38 years old now. At the time, I was 33 or 34. And as a college student, I went to Morehouse College in Atlanta, which is where Martin Luther King went to school as well. And I was very much an activist as a student. I was the activist who got on other students' nerves. I was that guy. Like I literally owned my own megaphone. Like that's when you know you take activism seriously. I actually had a backup battery pack for my megaphone. So I'm just trying to paint a mental picture for you of who I was as a student. And I was student government president in 1999, and it was that year that a young African immigrant named Amadou Diallo was shot and killed, shot at 41 times by the police on the doorstep of his home. And his wonderful mother, Kadiatu, has become like a surrogate mother to me and my family there in New York. And that was in some ways an introduction for me in police brutality in America, how awful it could be. In 2006, I organized rallies when the NYPD shot a young brother named Shaun Bell 50 times. He was unarmed and nonviolent, 8 hours away from his wedding, when police said they thought they saw a gun in his car. He had literally never touched a gun a day in his life, and is shot leaving his bachelor party with his friends. I organized against racial injustice when a man shot a wonderful young brother named Jordan Davis in his own hometown because he had the music up too loud in his car. I helped organize people when another man, also in Florida, shot and killed a young brother named Trayvon Martin. But I'd never seen those actual things. I didn't see what happened to Amadou Diallo or Shaun Bell or Jordan Davis or Trayvon Martin. But I was at my cubicle in 2014, and sometimes how many of you work in a formal office space? Raise your hand if you work around other people in that type of space. Sometimes there's certain emails and things you don't know if you can watch a certain video in that space. And so a friend of mine sent me an email, and this is in July of 2014, and he said, "Shaun, something horrible has happened." And he said, "I need you to see this video." And in some ways, I had left behind my life as an activist. I had moved to California. My wife and I had adopted 2 of our nieces in addition to our own 3 children. And it was really taking everything I had to help raise and support our family. But the guys that I went to school with at Morehouse still knew me as Shaun the activist. And he said, man, there's something horrible that's happened. And he said, there's a video on YouTube, and there's a man on a street corner here in New York who's being harassed by police. And he said, Shaun, he's asking the police to leave him alone and communicating to them that he hasn't done anything wrong. And an officer comes up from behind and begins choking him. And he said they wrestle the man to the ground, still choking him, and you can hear the man yell out, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. He says, Shaun, the guy dies right there on the sidewalk. I didn't know if I wanted to click on the video. It had not made the news yet. So much has happened over the past 4 years alone. You heard so much has happened just in the past year. But this is in the summer of 2014, and there had never been a viral video like what I was about to see. And I clicked on the link, and it was the man that we came to later know as Eric Garner, literally breathing his last breath. And I had the thought at my cubicle, and it made sense to me at the time. I had the thought, I'm going to share this. I'm going to figure out a way to share this video. I'm going to try to explain to people what has happened. I literally did a Google search and found that the NYPD had actually banned the chokehold over a decade prior to this. And I said, I'm going to explain how this is a violation of his civil rights and human rights and policy, and I'm going to share this video. Because I had the thought, and it made a lot of sense to me at my cubicle in 2014, I had the thought, if people can become aware of this injustice, we will probably get justice. 3 weeks later, literally, I left my job at Global Green to start fighting against police brutality in this country when 2 more young black men, both unarmed, were shot and killed by police. One, a man named John Crawford at a Walmart in Ohio, and another, a young man named Mike Brown, right outside of his grandmother's home in a town called Ferguson, Missouri. And here was our theory, our thought. Here was the operating philosophy that we had. We thought if we marched, which was right, if we protested, if we distributed petitions, if we tweeted and Facebook, if we built awareness of these horrible injustices, that it would bring us closer to justice. And so in 2014, we fought for justice in July, in August, in September, in October, and November. And then that November, police shot and killed a 12-year-old boy named Tamir Rice in Cleveland, Ohio. And we thought, surely there'll be some type of justice for this boy. And we continued with those same methods. And a few weeks later, we learned that there would be no justice for any of those 4 victims. In fact, American police in 2014 shot and killed over 1,100 people, which is more than police in most developed countries kill in a decade, many than, in some countries, more than 100 years. And not a single officer was held responsible. But we continued with this strategy of building awareness, and it eventually hit many of us like a brick wall, where we learned the painful lesson that in this country, awareness is important to set the tone for justice, but it rarely brings justice itself. We tried these same methods in 2015 with police in Baltimore when they severed the spine of a young man named Freddie Gray, when they wrongly arrested a young woman named Sandra Bland and she died in police custody. We tried these same methods in 2016 when we saw a wonderful young man, a cafeteria supervisor who had memorized the names of every student in his school named Philando Castile when he was shot and killed on the 4th of July in his own car, and his fiance filmed it on Facebook Live. And we made the world aware of it, and what we realized is that awareness rarely brings justice all by itself. And I thought and prayed and considered what I would share with you this afternoon, and I want to teach you what I think is a painful lesson that took me about 4 years to understand. And in the remaining time I have, I want to teach you how we make change happen. Because every person in this room has something that you are frustrated about, something that disgusts you, something that worries you, something that deeply concerns you, not just about the state of this country, but about so many disturbing things going on all around the world. If you get a chance, if you are on social media, you'll see something that I've been advocating over the past 24 hours of people who are constantly trying to tell us that things aren't really as bad as we think they are. And really, that is just their subtle way of dismissing our struggles and our pain and our problems. But part of what I've been trying to advocate and break down in a systemic way is that no, things are just as bad as we think they are, and in some cases, they're actually much worse. There are 4 things that you need to make change happen. And awareness sets the tone, but it's really not even one of them. Now, I laugh and I take it as a compliment because the more I fight against Islamophobia, the more I see people thinking that I'm a Muslim. Because they cannot imagine, which is a disturbing critique of this country. They cannot imagine someone who's not a Muslim fighting for Muslims. I remember just a few years ago, there was a man that I had grown to respect who happens to be gay, and I was defending his human dignity and his civil rights and human rights, and people began strangely saying that I was gay because I was fighting for a man who was gay, which is peculiar. That we live in a country where people don't expect you to defend someone's rights, their civil and human rights, their dignity, if you're not a part of that group. I'm good friends with Sheikh Omar Suleiman, and I called him just a few weeks ago. We did an event, a fundraiser together for the Malcolm X Center in New York last week, but I was at my family took a vacation to Egypt 2 weeks ago, and before I left, I work at a place called The Intercept, an investigative journalism company, and they prepared me before I left for the possibility that I could be detained at customs. But we traveled, my family and I, my wife and our 5 kids traveled to Cairo, and we had a wonderful experience. And it's a peculiar, complicated time in Egypt right now. But the people were so warm and beautiful and welcomed us everywhere we were. And after 8 days in Cairo, we had 3 flights on the way back, and it took us about 24 hours. And when we finally got back home to New York, we were at JFK Airport. I had forgotten all about what my supervisors at The Intercept had told me about the possibility of being detained. 2 of our kids were kind of sick and under the weather, and we were so close to being home. We got off of the plane, and we got to customs. And I don't know how it is at your airport here, but at JFK in New York, there are kiosks where you can scan your passports. And so we scanned our passports, and all of my family's passports, they print out a printout, and they all were clear. And when mine printed out, it had an X on my face. But that had happened to me many times, and it was no big deal. And I was still not thinking that what was about to happen was going to happen. So the lady at the kiosk was actually incredibly courteous, and she said, listen, you all go to this line and just show them the papers and the printouts. And as we got in line, a customs agent came to our line and knew me and my family and my children by name and asked us about our family vacation in Cairo and said that I had to go with him. And of course, my family and my wife and kids were surprised. It wasn't that we were so disturbed at what happened, but it was disturbing to us how much he already knew about us. And as they literally took us to a plain white interrogation room, this is myself, my wife, and my children as young as 5 years old, we get there, and it's clear that they really didn't have anything to ask me, nothing of substance. It was just them attempting to intimidate me. And even the officer who spoke way too much and said way too much said that he was not the original officer on my case, which revealed to me that they had some type of case or that there was some type of file that they had considered with me. And he asked me, what we did in Cairo. I literally went through and was like, we visited the pyramids, we ate at restaurants, and they just wanted to understand. And what I understood in that moment was that I was experiencing the intersection of the Black Lives Matter movement and Islamophobia in America. There were really probably four things going on. In this country, there is an attack on journalists, of which I am one. There is an attack on activists, of which I am one. And there is a growing anti-Black and anti-Muslim sentiment in our government, and I happen to meet all of those boxes. And when I called my friend Omar, he laughed a little because I was so disturbed, and he said, Shaun, I've been detained a lot. And he asked me how long I was detained, and I told him it was about an hour, and he said, man, sometimes they'll keep me there for 5 or 6 hours. And it broke my heart that we live in a place where this is so common. But not based on fact, but based on bias, based on discrimination, based on bigotry. They will detain and harass people. And here's what I know. Making people aware of the problem doesn't solve it. Let me tell you how we solve it. The first thing that you need to make change happen is you need people, and they need to be energized, all right? You need people, and they need to be energized. Here's the problem. We often get energized people, and we think we're about to make change happen. Energy comes in a lot of forms. Energy can be pain, it can be anger, it can be frustration, it can be joy. Energy comes in many different forms, but often we will get energized people and we will fight hard for change and not get it, and we'll wonder why. That's because having energized people is only one part of how you make change happen. The second thing that you need energized people, but you also need organized people. I want to dig there for a moment. Like, this is a room of rather organized people. Somebody at the very least has your email address, probably your phone number. But I'm talking about us getting even more organized. I'm talking about even understanding what are the skills of everybody in the room. And often we're energized, but we're poorly organized for what it is that we're facing. And I don't know how organized everyone in this room is, but I can at least tell you that those who mean us harm, not just on issues of immigration, but on issues of Islamophobia, issues dealing with mass incarceration and police brutality, are highly organized. Their unions and organizations are deeply organized and have been so, not just for years, but sometimes for generations. And a lot of times, and it may be as painful for you to hear as it is for me to say, sometimes we lose very important battles because we're energized, but we're out organized. Even when we talk about voting issues like gerrymandering, that is them out organizing us. When we talk about voting rights, when we talk about many different issues in this country, we're dealing with someone else organizing in a way that causes them to win. We live right now in this country, we live at a time where Republicans control the House, the Senate, the presidency, in many ways the Supreme Court. They control almost 75% of state legislatures and nearly a similar number of governorships. And we can talk about it, but they organized themselves into that position. That's them out organizing other people. To make change happen, you need energized people, you need organized people, and here's the third thing that you need. Sometimes we'll dibble-dabble with energized and organized people, but you need a plan that matches the magnitude of the problem. Sometimes when I look at critical issues that we're facing in this country, and I've spoken now in almost 40 states all over the country. I've spoken at over 100 colleges and universities. And even when I'm speaking at law schools or sometimes even to groups of activists and organizers, and I'll ask them, hey, unpack for me what your plan is to change the problem that you're talking to me about. And what I've come to understand is that often we can explain our problems in great detail, but can pretty much write our solutions on the back of a napkin. It's not good enough. Your solutions, your plans, your strategies really shouldn't even be able to fit on a single page of a website. Often we lose because our plans are horribly outmatched by our problems. I teach a class on how to make change, and one of the things that I illustrate, I show a picture of the Affordable Care Act, which is some people call Obamacare. And the actual bill is over 10,000 pages. It's 2 stacks of paper, each taller than me. That's because, now we could argue and disagree about how quality of a plan that was, but when you see it, it shows you how intricate and how detailed the plan is. When we think about the problems that you are most deeply bothered by, just take a moment and think to yourself, how robust are your plans? Are they thorough enough? Are they meticulous enough? And will they outmatch the magnitude of the problem? And that leads me to the final thing, and it's important for where we are right now. You need energized people. You need organized people. You need robust, sophisticated plans. But you need the fourth thing, and we rarely have it, and it's a significant reason why we lose a lot. 2 young organizers picked me up at the airport today, and we had lunch, and we talked, and they instantly understood what I meant. We talked about how being an activist in so many ways means losing a whole lot. It means fighting daily. I'm not saying it has to be this way. It means fighting daily and normally losing. And it causes people to burn out. It causes people to give up. It makes it incredibly difficult to retain volunteers and leaders. And let me explain to you the final thing that we need, and it's central to why we lose so much. You need energized people, organized people, a sophisticated plan, and you need a lot of money. Let me tell you just for a moment. I bet you know who they are. There's a group in this country that really gets stuff done. They have energized people, organized people, sophisticated plans, and last year they spent about $350 million. Do you know who they are? The Koch brothers are one of them, but I was thinking of the NRA. This is not my endorsement of the NRA, but here's how effective they are. Last year, a man took a small arsenal of weapons in broad daylight into the middle of a mainstream hotel in Las Vegas, had the staff help him take the weapons up to his hotel room on a high floor. His room was comped to him, by the way, because he spent so much money gambling in the casino. He had about 20 weapons and thousands of rounds of ammunition. He kicked the window out of his hotel room and shot 520 people in the largest mass shooting in modern American history. And guess what our country did about it? Does anyone know? There is nothing to know. And what you need to understand is our country did nothing about it, not on accident, not from happenstance, but because there's a group of energized, organized people with sophisticated plans that back those plans with a lot of money, and that group consistently, regularly ensures that their agenda on all things related to firearms in this country is the rule of law. And what I need us to understand is that if we're going to actually see the legislation happen that we want to see, if we're going to actually elect the people that we desperately want to see in office, if we're going to block the horrible plans of bad politicians and corrupt leaders, if we're going to do that, it can't just be through tweets and Facebook posts. It can't just be, listen, our petitions could have 100 million signatures. Our marches could have 10 million people. But if we aren't just organized and energized, if we don't have plans that are well-funded, we will lose. We will lose here in this country, and our plans and our prayers for countries and people all over the world will fail if we don't change our philosophy on how to make change happen. Does that make sense? I want to encourage you to see justice as a part of your monthly budget. See civil rights and human rights as a part of who you are. Now, many of you may see that even as a part of your faith. But I want you to see it, it literally needs to be a line item on your budget. If you use budget software, if you have a Google spreadsheet, or if you write it down in a book, this organization, CAIR, needs to be a monthly obligation to you. The staff and the leadership here, day and night, are thinking about not just your safety and your security, but your advancement in this city, in this state, in the country, and around the world. And I admonish you to understand and begin understanding that if you don't back your plans and your dreams with a budget, they will die. Many a wonderful plan died in our hearts because it was underfunded. Now, they didn't ask me to do a financial appeal. Someone else is coming for that. But when you believe in something, I'll close with this thought. When you believe in something, one of the best forms of evidence is when you back it with your hard-earned money. Every single one of us in this room, we work so hard for what we have. And it's not so much about your money, it's a sign of your heart. And if you have a heart for change, a heart for justice, if you have a heart for CAIR, it needs to be a monthly, a regular obligation, an annual obligation. And I thank you that you're going to do it. Listen, thank you for supporting me. As I have ups and downs in my career, there's one group of people that consistently have my back and support me. And I thank you so much for your warm encouragement and support all the time. It means the world to me. Thank you for having me. Take care.